There comes a moment in every relationship, whether personal or professional, when someone realizes you've seen through them. It is often a subtle yet profound moment. The shift when the veil of charm and pretense slips away, exposing something far less refined beneath. This realization, for the manipulator, can feel like a loss of control. What once seemed like an effortless dance of influence becomes an uncomfortable exposure of true intentions. The moment they know that you've seen through their mask, the game changes. The removal of the mask is critical to understanding the psychology of manipulation. When a manipulator no longer feels they can use charm, flattery, or false pretense to control the dynamic, the veneer starts to crack. It is no longer about maintaining a facade. It becomes about maintaining dominance. This often marks the point where manipulation stops being subtle and starts to transform into something more deliberate. Strategic manipulation. It is no longer about being liked. It's about winning. It's no longer about connecting. It's about controlling. For anyone who has dealt with manipulation, the shift can feel unsettling. The sweet words that once made us feel special or important are replaced with calculated moves designed to undermine or confuse us. What once seemed like care now feels like a game. The charm fades, revealing a more sinister, power-driven agenda. It's in this moment that emotional clarity and discipline become not just tools of survival, but tools of mastery. The ancient Stoics, such as Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, provide valuable insights into how we can navigate this emotional minefield. Stoicism teaches us that emotional mastery is not about suppressing or denying our emotions. It is about understanding and channeling them. Stoics believe in cultivating inner strength, fortitude, and wisdom so that we can withstand the most turbulent forces, whether that be the chaos of the world or the manipulation of others. The Stoic path calls us to embrace clarity, to remain unmoved by the volatility of others, and to stand firm in our own truth. The Stoics remind us that our emotions should not control us, nor should we be at the mercy of others' emotional games. They advocate for a disciplined approach to the mind and the heart, where we don't simply react, but instead choose our responses with intentionality and wisdom. Marcus Aurelius' reflection that the best revenge is not to be like your enemy encapsulates the Stoic ethos. We need not return manipulation with manipulation. We need only to remain steadfast in our own virtue and clarity. This introduction sets the stage for understanding how to reclaim your peace when faced with manipulation. The tactics we will explore: psychological inversion, psychological re-entry, boundary reversal, covert sabotage, emotional mirroring, boundary erosion, and isolation through control are all strategies that manipulators use to destabilize, confuse, or control. But through the lens of Stoicism, these tactics no longer have power over us when we cultivate emotional clarity and discipline. By mastering our emotions, we can rise above the chaos, maintain our peace, and live in accordance with our true values. In this journey, we will explore how Stoicism provides a counterbalance to the emotional manipulation of others. It offers us not just protection, but a path to personal mastery, a way to live a life of integrity and emotional discipline, unaffected by the games of others. The ultimate victory in dealing with manipulation is not in proving the manipulator wrong, but in reclaiming your peace and emotional autonomy. The true power lies not in reacting, but in choosing not to be moved by the tactics of others. This is the Stoic approach to emotional mastery. Tactic 1. Psychological inversion. Psychological inversion is one of the most insidious forms of manipulation, as it subtly shifts the blame and responsibility onto you, making you question your perception of reality. After a confrontation or emotional exchange, the manipulator will often attempt to flip the script. Suddenly, you are the one portrayed as the problem, the one who is overly sensitive, the one who overreacted, the one who caused the issue. This is a common tactic used to destabilize your sense of self and distort your understanding of events. By inverting the narrative, they hope to undermine your clarity and self-awareness, leaving you unsure of where the truth lies. In these moments, the manipulator's objective is simple: to redirect focus away from their own behavior and onto your reaction. This not only deflects responsibility, but creates confusion, forcing you to question your feelings and your perception of events. The result is a weakening of your emotional boundaries, as you begin to doubt your ability to distinguish between what is real and what is being manipulated. Take the example of David, a man who has spent months maintaining clear boundaries with a friend who repeatedly disregarded them. After a confrontation where David makes it clear that his friend's actions have hurt him, the manipulator inverts the situation. Suddenly, David finds himself being portrayed as the one with the issue. You're just too sensitive. You always overreact to things. It's not a big deal, and you're blowing it out of proportion. The manipulator, now in the role of the victim, shifts the narrative, forcing David to reconsider his perception of the situation. Did he overreact? Was he too harsh? The manipulator's psychological inversion makes David question himself, undermining his confidence in his own judgment. This tactic is built on a fundamental manipulation of perception. The manipulator seeks to create doubt in your mind, eroding the clarity you once had about your boundaries, your feelings, and your sense of self. The goal is not only to maintain control, but to rewrite history to make you unsure of your truth. The irony of this tactic is that it can often be so subtle, so woven into the fabric of everyday interaction, that the person being manipulated doesn't even realize it's happening until it's too late. By the time they realize, they may find themselves doubting their own sanity, their own understanding of what is right and wrong. In the face of such manipulation, the Stoic response is one of calm clarity. The Stoic philosophy teaches us that we must hold firm to our truth, regardless of external influence or emotional pressure. The Stoic principle of ataraxia, a state of emotional tranquility, is achieved not by suppressing emotions, but by cultivating a disciplined mind that is not easily swayed by the opinions or tactics of others. For the Stoic, truth is unchanging, and we must remain anchored in it, even when others attempt to distort it. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most revered Stoic philosophers, frequently reminded himself to hold on to the clarity of his own truth, regardless of how others attempted to manipulate or deceive him. In his Meditations, he writes, "When someone is properly offended at me, I take a deep breath and remind myself that this person is acting out of their own ignorance and is now lost in their own illusions. I must not be swayed by their judgments, but stay rooted in the truth of my own actions." This is a direct challenge to the psychological inversion that manipulative people often use. The Stoic response is not to react to their manipulation, but to remain grounded in what you know to be true about the situation. A key Stoic practice in dealing with psychological inversion is the ability to distinguish between things we can control and things we cannot. According to Epictetus, one of the central figures in Stoic philosophy, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. This insight is crucial in handling the inversion tactic. The manipulator may try to distort the situation and cast doubt on your reality, but you have control over how you respond to it. Rather than engaging in a back-and-forth defense of your perspective, you can choose to calmly and firmly hold to your truth without needing to justify or explain it excessively. This is not about denying the other person's perspective, but about maintaining your clarity and emotional discipline in the face of confusion. When you remain grounded in your truth, you begin to notice when the manipulator attempts to invert the narrative. You can see through the tactic and recognize that the inversion is a deflection, a way for the manipulator to avoid accountability. In such moments, the Stoic response is to refuse to engage with the distortion. As Marcus Aurelius advises, we must refuse to let others drag us down into their emotional chaos. This means not allowing the manipulator to drag you into their web of distorted reality or to make you doubt your clarity. It means staying centered in your own judgment and not allowing external forces to alter your perception of what is true. Let's consider another example. One of a romantic partner, Sophia, who has been in a relationship where subtle manipulation has begun to surface. After a series of confrontations about dishonesty, the manipulator, her partner, shifts the story, portraying Sophia as the unreasonable one. "You're always accusing me of things," he says. "Maybe you should trust me more." At first, Sophia feels the weight of guilt, questioning whether her suspicions were unfounded. But through introspection and the clarity of Stoic philosophy, she recognizes that this is an inversion. Her partner is not acknowledging the issues at hand, but deflecting the blame onto her in an attempt to maintain control. Sophia chooses not to get drawn into his emotional manipulation, instead choosing to remain firm in her understanding of the situation. The Stoic response to psychological inversion is thus twofold. First, it involves refusing to let others distort the truth. By maintaining clarity in the face of manipulation, you protect your emotional well-being and sense of self. Second, it means embodying the Stoic ideal of self-awareness and integrity. As Epictetus advises, we must be aware of what is ours to control and what is not. We cannot control the manipulator's actions, but we can control how we respond to them. We do not need to justify or defend our truth incessantly. It is enough to remain grounded in it without allowing the manipulator's distortions to shake us. In conclusion, psychological inversion is one of the most effective ways that manipulators try to destabilize their targets. It relies on creating doubt and confusion, forcing you to question your own clarity and understanding of the situation. The Stoic approach provides a powerful countermeasure to this tactic. By focusing on emotional clarity, maintaining a disciplined mind, and holding firm to your own truth, you can avoid being drawn into the manipulator's game. As Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the truth is simple and steady. We must stay true to it, even when the world around us seeks to cloud it. By practicing this wisdom, you can weather the storm of psychological inversion and come out stronger on the other side. 2. Psychological re-entry. Psychological re-entry is a tactic that manipulators often employ once they've been exposed or confronted. After an altercation or emotional exposure, the manipulator withdraws, often going silent. They don't immediately respond to the confrontation or acknowledge the harm they've caused. Instead, they create an emotional void, allowing time to pass and waiting for you to forget the pain or intensity of the situation. Then, they make their move, a subtle attempt to re-enter your life without apology, without accountability, and with no acknowledgement of the damage done. This tactic is one of the most dangerous, as it plays on your vulnerability and desire for closure, leading you to question whether you are being too harsh or if you should simply move on. The manipulator's approach is to lull you into a false sense of emotional safety. They may start with innocent gestures, a casual text, a social media interaction, or a seemingly innocent comment that reopens the door to connection. At first, it may feel like a harmless attempt at reconnection, but the absence of any real apology or acknowledgement of their previous behavior reveals the true nature of the gesture. It is not an effort at genuine reconciliation. It is a strategic re-entry designed to regain control, to reassert influence over you, and to continue the manipulation. Consider the example of Sophia, who has previously confronted her partner about dishonesty in their relationship. After the confrontation, he goes silent. For days, there is no contact, and Sophia wonders if perhaps she was too harsh, if she misinterpreted his actions, or if she overreacted. Then, out of the blue, he sends a text. "I miss you." No apology, No reference to the issue that caused the rift, just a simple, emotionally charged message that seemed to invite forgiveness. This is psychological re-entry at its core. The manipulator creates emotional space, waits for you to question the confrontation, and then re-establishes contact to begin the cycle anew, all without taking responsibility for their actions. The danger of psychological re-entry lies in its subtlety. The manipulator's aim is not to offer genuine closure or healing, but to regain the power they lost in the confrontation. They don't seek resolution, they seek reassertion of control. It can be incredibly tempting to believe that their innocent attempt to reconnect is a sign of change, or that you are too quick to judge the situation. The manipulator is banking on this emotional uncertainty, hoping that you will let your guard down and return to the dynamic without requiring any real growth or accountability on their part. From a Stoic perspective, this tactic provides an opportunity for emotional detachment and discipline. The Stoic path teaches that we should not rush to react to emotional impulses, but instead should practice observation and self-control. It is crucial to understand that not all attempts at re-establishing communication are benign. Sometimes they are not efforts at reconciliation, but attempts to reassert control and influence. To engage without considering the true intent of the re-entry would be to fall into the trap of emotional manipulation once again. Epictetus, a key figure in Stoicism, often emphasized the importance of self-mastery and self-awareness. He believed that freedom is the only goal, and that freedom comes from mastering our emotions and desires rather than being ruled by them. When faced with psychological re-entry, this Stoic freedom manifests as the ability to observe the situation without being drawn into it. You are not required to react emotionally to the manipulator's actions or words because you are not seeking validation or approval. Your peace does not hinge on whether they accept responsibility for their behavior or whether they re-enter your life. Instead, it is rooted in your own emotional discipline. The Stoic response to psychological re-entry involves observation before engagement. As Marcus Aurelius writes in his Meditations, don't allow your mind to be pulled away from your proper course by the behavior of another. This principle is especially relevant when dealing with psychological re-entry. The manipulator's silence followed by sudden warmth is designed to disorient you, to make you second-guess your decision to distance yourself. But the Stoic response is to remain anchored in your own truth, to understand that not every action or communication from the manipulator requires a response. Just because someone reaches out to you does not mean you must engage, especially if there is no accountability for past actions. In the Stoic framework, emotional detachment is not cruelty, nor is it a sign of indifference. It is wisdom. Emotional detachment allows you to remain unaffected by the manipulator's attempts to re-enter your life and destabilize your emotional state. It means you are not driven by the emotional pull of wanting to be liked, reconciled with, or validated. Instead, you are grounded in your sense of self and integrity, able to assess the situation from a place of calm reflection rather than emotional reactivity. The key here is the Stoic practice of temperance, moderating your desires, impulses, and emotional reactions in favor of wisdom and reason. The Stoics were keenly aware of how easy it is to be swept up in the emotional currents of a relationship, particularly when manipulation is at play. But they also understood that it is precisely in these moments of emotional re-entry that we must be most vigilant. The emotional peace you have cultivated through Stoic practice is your armor in moments like these. You do not need to engage in the emotional drama or re-enter a dynamic that has already shown itself to be manipulative. Another important Stoic concept to consider is the idea of apatheia, the state of being free from passion, which does not mean indifference or coldness, but rather emotional clarity and mastery. When we experience psychological re-entry, we are called to respond with apatheia, to be neither swept up by the manipulator's emotional overtures nor resistant out of spite. We are called to remain centered, observing the situation with equanimity, and not reacting until there is true reason to engage. In a practical sense, the Stoic approach to psychological re-entry involves a few key steps. 1. Observation before. Reacting to the manipulator's re-entry, take a step back and observe their behavior. Ask yourself, is this a genuine attempt at reconciliation, or is it simply a strategic move to regain control? The absence of accountability is a key indicator that the latter is true. 2. Clarity. Recall the reasons for the initial confrontation. Why did you distance yourself in the first place? Reaffirm your boundaries and the lessons you've learned from the situation. 3. Emotional detachment. Resist the temptation to re-engage out of guilt, loneliness, or the desire for closure. Trust that closure is not always something that comes from others, but can be found within yourself through inner strength and clarity. 4. Avoidance of reactionary behavior. Don't feel compelled to prove yourself or justify your actions. The Stoic way is to remain silent when necessary and to let your actions speak for your integrity, not your words. As Marcus Aurelius advises, keep yourself simple, good, pure, unpretentious, a friend of justice, God-fearing, kind, full of affection, strong for your proper work. The path to emotional mastery and protection from manipulation lies not in responding to every emotional overture, but in remaining unwavering in your personal integrity and wisdom. In conclusion, psychological re-entry is a manipulative tactic designed to reopen the emotional door without offering any real resolution. It plays on your desire for connection and reconciliation, but does so without genuine accountability. The Stoic approach teaches that we must not rush to re-engage, but must instead observe the situation, maintain emotional discipline, and remain firm in our boundaries. By practicing observation, clarity, and emotional detachment, we protect ourselves from falling back into the manipulator's web and maintain our peace and emotional autonomy. Tactic 3. Boundary reversal. Boundary reversal is a tactic employed by manipulators to test and undermine the emotional and psychological barriers that you've established to protect yourself. It's a subtle, insidious strategy that involves turning your boundaries against you. When a manipulator sees that you are firm in setting limits, they will often respond by subtly testing those boundaries in ways that can make you question your decisions. These tests are typically small, insignificant seeming gestures or remarks that initially appear harmless, but they have a powerful effect. Their goal is to erode your boundaries gradually, forcing you to doubt whether you're being too harsh, too rigid, or too unforgiving. A manipulator may use silence, passive-aggressive comments, or indirect emotional pressure to make you question whether your boundaries are too strict or unjust. They might send messages or make gestures that don't directly address the core issue, but create discomfort and uncertainty. This is the manipulator's attempt to reverse the boundary you've set, making you feel guilty for holding that line, or even convincing you that the boundary is unnecessary or unkind. Over time, this erosion of boundaries can lead you to let your guard down, allowing the manipulator to regain influence over you. To illustrate this, consider the example of a friend who has repeatedly overstepped your boundaries in the past. After a confrontation in which you express that their behavior is hurtful, they may stop their actions temporarily. However, a few days later, they might send you a message. "I hope we're still friends. I don't want things to be awkward." At first glance, this message seems innocuous, even friendly. However, it is a subtle test of your boundaries. It places pressure on you to respond, to re-engage, and to let the manipulator back into your emotional space without them acknowledging the harm they've caused. The message may also induce guilt, making you wonder whether you're being too harsh by keeping your distance. This form of manipulation, relies on your emotional discomfort to create doubt. It pressures you into rethinking your boundaries and questioning whether you've made too much of the situation. The manipulator's silence or seeming innocence is a tactic that exploits your desire for peace and resolution, which can often be mistaken for forgiveness. If you give in to this pressure, your boundaries are effectively reversed. What once was a firm line of protection becomes a point of vulnerability, and you're left open to further manipulation. From a Stoic perspective, boundary reversal is a challenge to emotional discipline and clarity. The Stoics taught that we must live according to our principles and values, regardless of external pressures or emotional manipulation. Boundaries are not just emotional walls that protect us from harm. They are a reflection of our integrity and self-respect. To let those boundaries be eroded by manipulation is to sacrifice our emotional clarity and self-discipline, both of which are central tenets of Stoic philosophy. Marcus Aurelius often emphasized the importance of maintaining personal integrity in the face of external challenges. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This idea is crucial in understanding how to respond to boundary reversal. Your boundaries are a reflection of your internal state, your values, and your principles. They are not meant to be negotiable or flexible based on the desires of others. A manipulator's attempt to erode your boundaries is an external event meant to disrupt your internal peace. The Stoic response is to recognize this attempt for what it is and to stand firm in your values, knowing that maintaining your boundaries is essential for preserving your emotional and psychological well-being in dealing with boundary reversal. The Stoic approach begins with self-awareness and clarity. The Stoics believed that emotional reactions should not control us. Instead, we should cultivate apatheia, a state of emotional clarity and detachment, so that we are not swayed by the impulses or actions of others. In the case of boundary reversal, this means recognizing when the manipulator is testing your limits and not giving in to the temptation to question your decisions. The boundary you've set is a reflection of your need for self-respect and emotional peace, and no one should be allowed to convince you otherwise. Observing your own reactions, one of the most important elements of Stoic practice when confronted with boundary reversal is to observe your reactions without judgment. Epictetus, another foundational Stoic philosopher, emphasized the importance of maintaining control over our impulses and desires. He believed that the key to happiness was not in avoiding discomfort, but in how we respond to it. In the Discourses, he writes, "It's not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." This is especially relevant when someone tests your boundaries. The manipulator may send a message that subtly pressures you to re-evaluate your stance. Your first instinct may be to feel guilty, to doubt whether you're being too rigid, or to fear the consequences of standing firm. But according to Stoic teachings, it's not these external pressures that should disturb you, but rather how you interpret and respond to them. When a manipulator tests your boundaries, the Stoic response is to recognize your emotional reaction, observe it without judgment, and then choose how to act with rational clarity. Instead of impulsively responding to guilt or the desire for peace, take a step back. Ask yourself, is this boundary a reflection of my core values and self-respect? Do I feel at peace with my decision? If the answer is yes, then there is no need to allow external manipulation to reverse that boundary. You must learn to trust your judgment and stand by your decision, even when the manipulator tries to make you doubt it. Emotional detachment. The Stoics also believed in the power of emotional detachment, not in the sense of indifference, but in the sense of not allowing external events or people to control your emotions. Emotional detachment in the context of boundary reversal means not being moved by the manipulator's attempts to guilt or pressure you into changing your boundaries. It does not mean being cold or unfeeling, but rather means recognizing that You are in control of your own emotional space. You can remain compassionate while still holding firm to your boundaries. You can feel empathy for the manipulator's discomfort or desire to reconnect, but still remain steadfast in your decision. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius advises, don't waste time on what you can't control. The manipulator's attempts to reverse your boundaries are outside of your control, but your response to them is not. You have the power to choose whether or not to allow the manipulator back into your emotional life, and the Stoic path is to choose wisely, with clarity and detachment. The importance of consistency in maintaining boundaries is essential for emotional clarity. The Stoics recognized that our actions should be aligned with our values and principles. To reverse your boundaries under pressure is to act against your core beliefs, and it undermines your integrity. Epictetus reminds us in the Enchiridion, don't make a show of yourself, and do not act in such a way that you will be disappointed when the external world doesn't align with your desires. If your boundaries are consistent, regardless of the manipulator's attempts, you will not be swayed. This consistency brings inner peace and fortitude, allowing you to navigate the manipulation with emotional discipline. In conclusion, boundary reversal is a tactic designed to test the firmness of your emotional boundaries and manipulate you into doubting your own decisions. The Stoic approach to this manipulation involves emotional detachment, self-awareness, and maintaining consistency in your actions. By cultivating clarity and not allowing external pressures to influence your judgment, you protect your emotional peace and integrity. Remember, your boundaries are not negotiable based on the whims of others. They are a reflection of your self-respect and values. In the words of Marcus Aurelius, the greatest wealth is to live content with little. Your emotional peace is the greatest wealth you can possess, and boundary reversal is one of the tools used by manipulators to strip it away. Through the Stoic practice of maintaining clarity, consistency, and detachment, you preserve that peace and keep your emotional sovereignty intact. Tactic 4. Covert Sabotage and Character Assassination. Covert sabotage and character assassination are two of the most insidious tactics used by manipulators once they feel their control is slipping. These tactics are employed when the manipulator, having lost the ability to directly influence you, turns to more passive-aggressive methods of retaliation. Rather than confronting you directly, they choose to undermine your reputation, sow discord among your social circle, or subtly tarnish your image when you are not around. This is a strategic form of revenge meant to weaken your social standing and isolate you, all while remaining hidden behind a veil of plausible deniability. The manipulator's goal is simple: to discredit you in the eyes of others, thereby regaining power and control over you through reputation rather than direct manipulation. The challenge in dealing with covert sabotage and character assassination is that these tactics are often hard to detect. The manipulator doesn't act openly, but uses quiet, indirect methods like whisper campaigns, gossip, or selective misinformation. These attacks on your character can be difficult to confront because they often occur behind your back and can be disguised as casual conversations, misunderstandings, or distorted facts. You may not even be aware of the sabotage until it has already done its damage, leaving you feeling isolated, confused, and vulnerable. A typical example of this occurs when a colleague who feels threatened by your boundary setting or your refusal to engage in manipulative behavior starts spreading rumors about your work ethic or personal character. They may casually mention to others that you've been difficult to work with, that you're unreliable, or that you've exhibited behaviors that are completely contrary to your true character. These attacks on your reputation are designed to create doubt about your integrity, subtly eroding your social and professional standing. Meanwhile, the manipulator remains above the fray, able to claim innocence and even pretend to be the victim, all while quietly sabotaging you from behind the scenes. The Stoic response to covert sabotage and character assassination is rooted in understanding the nature of reputation and character. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, speaks directly to the importance of maintaining our integrity in the face of slander. How much time you should waste on false accusations? None at all, because your worth and your character are not dependent on the judgment of others, but on how you act according to your values. This insight serves as the foundation of the Stoic response to character assassination. The Stoic approach is not to engage in futile attempts to defend your reputation, but to focus on living in accordance with your true principles and allowing your actions to speak for themselves. The first essential Stoic concept when faced with covert sabotage is the recognition that reputation is not the same as character. Reputation is how others perceive you, while character is who you truly are when no one is looking. Reputation is fragile, malleable, and often distorted by the opinions and judgments of others. In contrast, character is solid and grounded in your actions, values, and integrity. The Stoics believed that we should not base our self-worth on how others view us, because such views are often superficial, fleeting, and out of our control. Instead, we should focus on maintaining our own character, knowing that it is the only thing that truly defines us. Epictetus, in his discourses, reminds us that what is it that troubles you? The things others say about you? But can you control their opinions? No, you cannot. Therefore, you are not disturbed by them. This principle is crucial when dealing with covert sabotage. You cannot control the opinions others form about you, especially when those opinions are based on misinformation or manipulation. If you try to spend your time defending yourself against these attacks, you are wasting energy on something outside of your control. The Stoic approach is to rise above the slander, trusting that time will reveal the truth. Instead of reacting to the manipulation, focus on living truthfully and authentically, confident that your character will eventually shine through. Another key Stoic response to character assassination is to avoid the temptation to engage in a melee counterattack. When someone's character is under attack, especially by a manipulative individual, there is often a strong desire to retaliate, to defend one's reputation by revealing the manipulator's deceit or hypocrisy. However, this response is at odds with the Stoic principle of apatheia, the ability to maintain emotional calm and detachment in the face of external challenges. Stoicism teaches that we must not allow ourselves to be dragged into emotional conflicts or reactive behavior, especially when we are being attacked unfairly. Engaging in a battle of words or a tit-for-tat with the manipulator only fuels the fire and takes us further away from our own peace of mind. Marcus Aurelius advises, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." This is perhaps the most profound Stoic response to character assassination. Rather than trying to defend yourself or attack the manipulator, the Stoic response is to act with integrity, to live according to your values, and to allow time and truth to expose the manipulator's deceit. By doing so, you disarm the manipulator and strip them of their power. You let your actions and character speak for themselves, and you allow the manipulator to show their true colors through their own behavior. It's important to understand that while Stoicism encourages emotional detachment, it doesn't advocate passivity or indifference. In fact, Stoicism calls for active engagement in the world, but always with a sense of clarity, purpose, and wisdom. If your reputation is being attacked in a way that could cause real harm to your life or well-being, the Stoic approach is to calmly and rationally address the issue. However, this should be done not from a place of defensiveness, but from a place of factual clarity and inner strength. You do not need to go into an emotional battle with the manipulator or try to prove yourself to others. Instead, focus on communicating your truth clearly and assertively without getting caught up in unnecessary drama. Consider the example of Ethan, a man who was a target of covert sabotage in his workplace. After distancing himself from unethical behavior, a colleague began a whisper campaign, spreading rumors that Ethan was difficult to work with, untrustworthy, and unreliable. At first, Ethan was tempted to confront the person and expose the lies. However, recalling the Stoic teachings, he chose a different path. Rather than defending himself through a lengthy explanation or confrontation, he continued to perform his job with excellence, demonstrating professionalism, integrity, and trustworthiness. Over time, the truth of his character became evident to those around him, and the manipulator's efforts to sabotage him ultimately failed. In the end, the manipulator's character was revealed, not through direct confrontation, but through Ethan's unwavering commitment to his own values. The Stoic approach to covert sabotage and character assassination, therefore, is to focus on maintaining personal integrity and emotional discipline. Rather than becoming consumed with defending your reputation, the Stoic response is to live authentically, stay true to your values, and allow time and truth to expose the manipulators. Deceit. By doing so, you prevent the manipulator from gaining any power over you and reclaim your emotional autonomy. In conclusion, covert sabotage and character assassination are manipulative tactics designed to undermine your reputation and isolate you. The Stoic response is to rise above the slander and focus on living according to your principles. As Marcus Aurelius advises, the best way to disarm the manipulator is not through retaliation, but by embodying the integrity, wisdom, and clarity that they lack. By focusing on your own character and not the opinions of others, you protect yourself from the manipulator's attempts to destabilize you. The truth always comes to light, and by living your truth, you allow time to reveal the reality of the situation. Tactic 5. Emotional mirroring. Fake growth. Emotional mirroring, or the tactic of fake growth, is one of the more deceptive strategies used by manipulators once they realize they've lost some control over you. It involves mimicking the behaviors or emotions they believe you want to see in them in order to regain your trust or affection. It is not true change or genuine growth, but a calculated performance designed to create the illusion of self-improvement. The manipulator adopts a facade of emotional awareness, remorse, or personal growth, offering apologies, discussing therapy, or demonstrating surface-level emotional vulnerability in an attempt to manipulate you back into their sphere of influence. In reality, emotional mirroring is not about sincere transformation, but about manipulation disguised as self-improvement. The manipulator may begin to speak the language of change. They express regret, discuss lessons they've learned, and perhaps even commit to working on themselves. These actions may appear genuine, but they lack the consistency and depth that true emotional growth entails. The manipulator is not seeking to make lasting, positive changes to their behavior, but rather trying to win back your trust, neutralize your boundaries, and regain control. This tactic hinges on your hope that they've truly changed, prompting you to let your guard down and re-engage with them in the same dynamic that hurt you in the first place. Consider the example of Jasmine, who has been in a tumultuous, manipulative relationship. After a difficult breakup, her partner suddenly starts to reach out, claiming that they've changed. They apologize profusely, speak of their deep personal growth, and even bring up the idea of attending therapy. The manipulator's message is clear. I've recognized my mistakes, and I'm ready to make things right. Jasmine, understandably, is tempted by this apparent transformation. It's difficult to resist the idea that someone who has wronged you is now taking responsibility for their actions. However, this is precisely the trap that emotional mirroring sets. The manipulator knows that their words, however rehearsed, can plant the seed of hope, tricking you into believing in their transformation. In reality, this growth is often a temporary performance, designed to lull you back into the relationship dynamic without any real change in behavior. The core issue with emotional mirroring is that it relies on surface-level gestures that lack the substance and consistency required for true growth. The manipulator may repeat what they think you want to hear: apologies, promises, expressions of vulnerability, but these are often short-lived and followed by a return to the same toxic patterns. The apology, the therapy talk, the emotional outpouring are all performances to elicit a response from you, not genuine expressions of remorse or self-awareness. The manipulator wants to make you believe that change is happening so that you can let down your emotional defenses and re-enter a dynamic that allows them to regain control. Stoic philosophy offers a profound countermeasure to this tactic. The Stoics understood that true growth and change are slow, deliberate processes that occur over time, and they emphasized the importance of consistency and integrity. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, reflects on the nature of real change. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. This quote encapsulates the Stoic approach to growth. True transformation happens not through words, but through actions, consistency, and the steady alignment of one's life with virtue and integrity. A key Stoic concept in confronting emotional mirroring is the idea of clarity over hope. The Stoics taught that we must not confuse mere words or promises with actual change. Words are easy, actions are hard. The Stoic path encourages us to look for consistency in behavior, not just for one-off apologies or displays of emotion. The manipulator may say the right things, but if their actions don't align with those words, then the change is not real. In fact, the Stoic practice of mindfulness and emotional detachment helps us to discern between genuine growth and empty promises. Rather than being swayed by emotional appeals or hoping that the manipulator has changed, the Stoic response is to remain vigilant and measure change by the consistency of the manipulator's actions, not by their words. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, famously said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This is essential in the case of emotional mirroring. The manipulator will craft their emotional plea with the intention of eliciting a specific response from you, such as forgiveness, reconciliation, or re-engagement. However, the Stoic approach encourages to remain detached from the emotional pull of these gestures. Rather than reacting impulsively or emotionally, we should take the time to observe and reflect. Is this person showing signs of consistent, long-term change? Or are they simply repeating patterns from the past, using emotionally charged language to manipulate you into giving them another chance? The Stoics also emphasize the importance of patience and time in assessing whether someone has truly changed. True personal transformation is slow and consistent, not instantaneous or performance-based. As Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the goal is not to gain the approval of others, but to live a virtuous life that is aligned with reason. If someone truly changes, it will become apparent over time through their behavior, consistency, and actions. A Stoic would be cautious of any sudden or superficial shifts in behavior, as real growth is measured over the long haul, not in short bursts of emotional display. Not another crucial Stoic concept that addresses the issue of emotional mirroring is self-control. The Stoics believed that we must exercise control over our own emotions and desires. When faced with an emotional plea for forgiveness or change, the Stoic response is not to give in to the desire to feel good about granting forgiveness or to indulge in the hope that things will be different. Instead, the Stoic practices emotional detachment, allowing them to evaluate the situation rationally without getting caught up in fleeting emotions. Emotional mirroring works because it preys on our desire for closure, emotional validation, and the belief that people can change quickly. The Stoic, however, remains steadfast and discerning, choosing to evaluate change based on reason rather than emotional appeal. In practical terms, the Stoic response to emotional mirroring is to avoid falling into the trap of quick judgment or emotional reaction. If someone claims to have changed, the Stoic does not rush to forgive or re-enter the relationship. Instead, they observe the person's behavior over time, allowing the truth to reveal itself. They do not let their hope or desire for reconciliation cloud their judgment. As Epictetus advises, we must not let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason that you use today. In the case of emotional mirroring, that weapon of reason is the ability to discern between words and actions, between superficial change and genuine growth. Finally, it is essential to recognize that emotional mirroring is a manipulative tactic that plays on the human desire for hope and resolution. The manipulator knows that emotional appeals are powerful tools, and they will use them to exploit your empathy and compassion. The Stoic, however, is guided by clarity, wisdom, and emotional discipline. They understand that true growth and change take time, and they remain steadfast in their commitment to personal integrity and emotional clarity. Rather than being swayed by superficial changes or empty promises, the Stoic remains vigilant, letting time and consistent actions reveal the truth. In conclusion, emotional mirroring is a deceptive tactic designed to create the illusion of personal growth or change. The manipulator uses this tactic to regain control over you by appearing to transform emotionally, while in reality, no real change has occurred. The Stoic response to emotional mirroring is rooted in the principles of patience, consistency, and emotional detachment. By focusing on actions rather than words, by exercising self-control, and by allowing time to reveal the truth, the Stoic is able to resist the manipulation and maintain emotional clarity. True change, as the Stoics teach, is not a performance but a slow, deliberate process rooted in virtue and integrity. Tactic 6. Boundary erosion through subtle pressure. Boundary erosion through subtle pressure is one of the more insidious tactics that manipulators use when they no longer have direct control over you, but still wish to regain influence. Unlike overt violations of boundaries, this tactic is more covert, often involving small, seemingly harmless gestures that accumulate over time, slowly chipping away at the limits you've set for yourself. The manipulator's goal is not to break your boundaries all at once, but to erode them gradually, often using guilt, emotional pressure, or strategic acts of kindness to make you question your decisions. This tactic relies on the manipulator's ability to create confusion and doubt, making it difficult for you to recognize the pressure being applied until it is too late. These small pressures can come in many forms. The manipulator may send innocent-sounding text message, share a song that they know will remind you of a time when things were better, or get mutual friends to pass along messages that subtly press you to re-engage. These gestures seem harmless, even thoughtful, but they are calculated attempts to create emotional openings and weaken the boundaries you have carefully established. The manipulator's ultimate aim is to wear you down, making it harder for you to maintain your boundaries without feeling guilty or self-doubting. A typical example of this might involve a friend or partner who, after a confrontation where you set a clear boundary, starts sending small, affectionate gestures, perhaps a text that says, "I hope you're doing well," or a memory shared on social media that evokes positive emotions from the past. Initially, these gestures may seem innocent, but over time, they begin to create a sense of emotional pressure. You start to feel guilty for not responding, or feel the pull to reconnect out of a sense of nostalgia or empathy. The manipulator doesn't demand a response outright. They simply create small openings in your emotional defenses that make it more difficult for you to uphold your boundary. The manipulator's strategy is simple. If they can create enough emotional tension, you will begin to doubt the firmness of your boundary. You may begin to question whether you're being too harsh, too distant, or whether the boundary is truly necessary. The manipulator counts on your vulnerability, your tendency to want peace, connection, and validation, to erode the limits you've set for your own emotional well-being. From a Stoic perspective, boundary erosion through subtle pressure is a direct challenge to your emotional discipline and clarity. Stoicism teaches that our emotional responses should not be governed by external forces or the behavior of others. Instead, we must cultivate inner strength and wisdom, responding to situations from a place of rational clarity, not emotional reaction. The Stoics recognized that the key to emotional mastery lies in maintaining control over our internal state, regardless of the external pressures we may face. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, writes, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This insight underscores the Stoic approach to dealing with boundary erosion. You cannot control the manipulator's actions, but you can control your response to them. The Stoic response to subtle boundary erosion begins with self-awareness. The first step is to recognize when your boundaries are being tested, even in small ways. The Stoics emphasize the importance of mindfulness and vigilance in protecting our emotional state. In order to maintain control, you must first be aware of the small, seemingly innocent gestures that are designed to push your limits. This awareness allows you to step back and evaluate the situation with a clear mind, rather than being swept up in the emotional pull of the manipulator's actions. Epictetus, another prominent Stoic philosopher, taught that we must not be swayed by external events or the opinions of others. He famously said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This is essential when dealing with boundary erosion. The manipulator will likely attempt to create emotional pressure by triggering feelings of guilt, affection, or nostalgia. The Stoic response is to recognize that these emotions, while natural, should not control your actions. Instead of reacting impulsively to the manipulator's gestures, the Stoic response is to step back, observe the situation, and make a conscious decision based on reason, not emotion. The practice of emotional detachment is a central aspect of Stoicism and plays a critical role in maintaining boundaries. Emotional detachment does not mean indifference. Rather, it means having the wisdom to separate yourself from the emotional pull of others' behavior. It allows you to respond from a place of clarity and self-respect rather than emotional reactivity. By remaining detached, you are better able to assess the manipulator's actions without feeling compelled to act based on fleeting emotions or the desire for approval. Marcus Aurelius provides us with a powerful reminder in his Meditations. When someone does you wrong, it is not what they do that harms you, but how you choose to react. This quote reflects the Stoic belief that we are in control of our emotional state and that we must choose our responses deliberately and with wisdom. Another key Stoic concept that helps in handling boundary erosion is self-mastery. The Stoics believed that we should have mastery over our desires and impulses, which is crucial when dealing with manipulative behavior. The manipulator's small gestures may evoke feelings of guilt, affection, or desire to reconnect, but the Stoic path encourages us to master these emotional impulses. The desire to please others or to feel validated should not sway us from our principles and boundaries. Self-mastery is the practice of staying true to one's values, even when emotional pressure is applied. By cultivating this discipline, we can resist the temptation to let go of our boundaries for the sake of temporary emotional relief or connection. In practical terms, the Stoic approach to boundary erosion involves several steps. 1. Awareness. The first step is recognizing when the manipulator is testing your boundaries. These subtle pressures often come in the form of small gestures or emotional appeals that appear harmless, but are actually calculated attempts to create openings in your emotional defenses. Be vigilant and observe the manipulator's actions without being swayed by them. 2. Reflection. Take time to reflect on why you set the boundary in the first place. What purpose does the boundary serve in maintaining your emotional well-being and integrity? When you reaffirm the reasons behind your decision, it becomes easier to stay committed to your limits. 3. Detachment. Practice emotional detachment. Recognize that the manipulator's actions are beyond your control, but your response is not. Instead of reacting to the emotional pull of their gestures, take a step back and respond with clarity and reason. 4. Firmness. Maintain your boundary with consistency and firmness. The manipulator may attempt to make you feel guilty or question your decision, but the Stoic response is to remain grounded in your values and stay true to your principles. Consistency in maintaining boundaries is key to emotional mastery. Patience. Recognize that boundary erosion is a gradual process. It may take time for the manipulator's tactics to unfold fully, but with patience and awareness, you can maintain your boundaries and prevent them from being eroded. In conclusion, boundary erosion through subtle pressure is a manipulative tactic that seeks to undermine your limits gradually. By applying small emotional pressures, the manipulator aims to wear you down and make you question your decisions. The Stoic response to this tactic is to cultivate emotional awareness, detachment, and self-mastery. By recognizing when your boundaries are being tested, reflecting on the reasons behind them, and responding with clarity and consistency, you can maintain your emotional sovereignty and protect yourself from manipulation. As Marcus Aurelius reminds, US, the best way to predict your future is to create it. By maintaining firm boundaries and practicing emotional discipline, you create a future in which you remain in control of your emotional and psychological well-being, free from the manipulative tactics of others. Tactic 7. Isolation through control. Isolation through control is one of the most insidious tactics that manipulators use when they realize they no longer have direct access to your emotional or psychological space. Once a manipulator loses the ability to control you through charm, coercion, or emotional manipulation, they often turn to more subtle, indirect forms of control, such as isolating you from your social circle or creating divisions between you and your support network. This tactic aims to weaken your ability to resist their influence by making you feel emotionally isolated, unsupported, and alone. The manipulator may attempt to distort how others perceive you, using whispers, rumors, or indirect means to isolate you and make you feel as though you have no one to turn to. In the face of isolation, the manipulator seeks to regain control by eroding the very support systems that can provide clarity, perspective, and strength. They might use subtle forms of sabotage, creating rifts between you and your friends, family, or colleagues. They may spread false information, exaggerate your behavior, or whisper negative things behind your back. The goal is simple: to create doubt in the minds of others, causing them to question your character or your version of events, and to re-establish the manipulator's position as the primary influence in your life. This tactic is particularly dangerous because it often goes unnoticed until it is too late. The manipulator doesn't directly confront you, but works indirectly to control your environment and the people around you, making it increasingly difficult to stand your ground. An example of this might involve a colleague or a friend who, after you set clear boundaries or distance yourself from manipulative behavior, begins a campaign to turn others against you. They might make subtle remarks about your behavior, cast doubt on your motivations, or present a distorted version of events to mutual friends or coworkers. Over time, these subtle whispers create confusion, eroding the trust that others have in you and making you feel increasingly isolated. The manipulator hopes that, through this isolation, you will become more vulnerable and easier to control once again. If successful, the manipulator can reassert their influence by positioning themselves as the only person who understands, you or as the one who has your best interests at heart. Stoicism offers a powerful framework for responding to isolation through control. The Stoics taught that we should not be swayed by external forces, particularly those outside of our control, such as the opinions or behaviors of others. The Stoic philosophy encourages us to focus on our own actions, our inner character, and our own emotional autonomy. By doing so, we are able to maintain peace and clarity, even in the face of external manipulation. One of the core Stoic ideas relevant to handling isolation is the understanding that our true worth and happiness are not dependent on the approval of others. In fact, seeking external validation or trying to control how others perceive us is seen by the Stoics as a source of emotional turmoil. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, writes, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This insight directly applies to situations where the manipulator is attempting to control how others view you. The Stoic response is to focus on your own integrity and self-respect, not on the opinions of those who may be swayed by manipulation or false narratives. By remaining rooted in your own values and principles, you are less susceptible to the emotional damage caused by isolation. Not another key Stoic principle that addresses isolation through control is the concept of apatheia, a state of emotional tranquility and freedom from external disturbances. The Stoics believed that our emotional peace should not depend on the actions of others. When you are isolated by the manipulator, it is easy to feel distressed, to question your own actions, or to fear that you are losing the support of those around you. However, the Stoic response to this pressure is to detach from the emotional turbulence caused by the manipulator's behavior. Instead of reacting emotionally to the manipulation or trying to correct the misperceptions of others, the Stoic maintains emotional clarity and remains focused on what is within their control. Epictetus, a prominent Stoic philosopher, advised, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." In the case of isolation, this means recognizing that the manipulator's actions, whether they involve spreading rumors or sowing division, are outside of your control. The emotional turmoil you experience as a result of these actions is a reflection of how you choose to react to them. The Stoic response, then, is to accept that others' opinions may be distorted, and instead of trying to control how others perceive you, focus on maintaining your own inner peace and clarity. The Stoics also emphasize the importance of cultivating true inner strength and self-sufficiency, which is especially relevant when faced with isolation. Marcus Aurelius believed that external conditions, including the opinions of others, are not within our control, and that true freedom comes from within. In Meditations, he writes, "Freedom is the only goal, and that means to be able to bear whatever happens and to remain unchanged in your moral character." When faced with isolation, the Stoic response is to rely on your inner resources, your character, your integrity, and your wisdom, rather than seeking solace in the approval of others or trying to manipulate the opinions of those around you. By cultivating inner strength, you become less vulnerable to the manipulator's attempts to control you through isolation. Practical application of Stoic principles in the face of isolation involves several key steps. 1. Recognize what you can control. The first step is to acknowledge that the opinions and behaviors of others are beyond your control. You cannot control how the manipulator behaves or how others perceive you, but you can control how you respond. Instead of reacting impulsively to the manipulator's efforts, focus on what is within your power, your actions, your responses, and your integrity. 2. Focus on your inner integrity. The Stoics believe that our true worth lies not in the judgments of others, but in our actions and character. When faced with isolation, focus on maintaining your own integrity and staying true to your values. This internal focus will help you maintain emotional clarity and avoid getting lost in the manipulation of others. 3. Maintain emotional detachment. Isolation often comes with feelings of loneliness, rejection, or self-doubt. The Stoic path encourages emotional detachment, recognizing that your emotional peace does not depend on others' approval or on your social connections. By practicing emotional detachment, you can remain steadfast in your decisions and avoid being swayed by the manipulator's tactics. 4. Practice patience and endurance. Isolation can be a prolonged experience, but the Stoics teach the importance of patience and endurance in the face of adversity. In his Meditations, Marcus Aurelius writes, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." The Stoic approach to isolation is not to resist it, but to endure it with patience and resilience. In time, the truth of your character will be revealed, and the manipulator's false narrative will lose its power. Seek true support, not validation. Finally, the Stoics encourage seeking support from those who share your values and integrity, rather than seeking validation from those who may be influenced by the manipulator. True support comes from people who understand your character and respect your boundaries, not from those who are easily swayed by gossip or manipulation. In conclusion, isolation through control is a manipulative tactic designed to weaken your support network and make you more vulnerable to the manipulator's influence. The Stoic response to isolation is to focus on what is within your control, your inner integrity, emotional discipline, and self-sufficiency. By practicing emotional detachment, cultivating inner strength, and remaining steadfast in your values, you can resist the manipulator's attempts to control you through isolation. As Marcus Aurelius wisely counsels, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. In the face of isolation, the Stoic response is to remain true to yourself, relying on your inner strength and wisdom, and trusting that time and truth will reveal the manipulator's deceit. Conclusion: the final victory in the face of manipulation lies not in proving the manipulator wrong, nor in retaliating against their tactics, but in reclaiming your peace, your emotional sovereignty, and your integrity. Throughout this exploration, we've seen how manipulators employ various tactics: psychological inversion, psychological re-entry, boundary reversal, covert sabotage, emotional mirroring, boundary erosion, and isolation through control, all aimed at destabilizing your sense of self and reasserting their influence. Yet, the true triumph comes when you stop reacting to these tactics and begin to choose peace over chaos. The Stoic philosophy offers a powerful and timeless guide in navigating such situations. Stoicism teaches that emotional mastery is not about suppressing or denying feelings, but about understanding and directing them in accordance with reason and virtue. By focusing on what we can control, our thoughts, our responses, and our actions, we are able to transcend the emotional chaos created by others' manipulations. As Marcus Aurelius wisely said, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. The manipulator's power lies in your emotional reactivity. Once you cease to react, they lose their grip over you. This emotional mastery, however, is not about indifference or cruelty. It is about living a life of integrity, where your actions are not motivated by the desire to please others or to prove yourself. Instead, you live in alignment with your values, your principles, and your truth, regardless of how others behave. By doing so, you protect your peace from being disturbed by the manipulator's games. The final victory is the realization that you do not need to engage in the manipulator's drama or play by their rules. Your peace is not for sale, nor is it contingent on the approval of those who seek to control or manipulate you. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius frequently reflects on the impermanence of external events and people. He reminds himself that no external force can control his mind unless he allows it. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. This wisdom is essential when dealing with manipulation. The manipulator may attempt to provoke you, to distort your reality, or to isolate you, but they can only succeed if you relinquish control over your own responses. The Stoic path is one of resilience and wisdom, where you stand firm in your own truth and refuse to be swept away by external forces. By choosing peace over chaos, you ultimately free yourself from the manipulator's grip. The Stoics remind us that true freedom is not found in external conditions, but in the way we choose to respond to them. Emotional mastery, as Epictetus teaches, is about recognizing that what happens to us is not as important as how we react to it. You do not need to prove your worth, defend your reputation, or engage in a battle for validation. The manipulator's defeat lies in their inability to provoke you into reacting. You are the one who decides when and how to engage, and by choosing to disengage from their manipulation, you regain your power. In conclusion, the final victory is not about defeating the manipulator, but about choosing peace, clarity, and emotional autonomy. It is about living with integrity and emotional discipline, allowing the truth of your character to shine through, regardless of the manipulator's tactics. As the Stoics have taught us for centuries, the only true victory is the mastery of self, of our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions. When we achieve this mastery, we no longer need to react to manipulation. Instead, we rise above it, rooted in our own truth and anchored in our inner peace.